Hey, watch me do this puzzle while you listen to this story. In the early 1850s, travelers along the Underground Railroad began hearing the same name whispered among safe houses: Sarah Whitlow. She wasn't as famous as the legendary freedom fighter Harriet Tubman, but those who traveled with Sarah said she had the same courage. Sarah was known for guiding groups through the thick forests of Maryland where slave catchers rarely dared to search. She moved quietly through the woods, never leaving clear footprints, never lighting fires, and she carried only one thing that gave away her position in the darkness: an old iron lantern. The lantern had cloudy glass and a small golden flame that seemed brighter than any ordinary light. People who traveled with her said the flame never flickered, even when the wind blew hard through the trees. But Sarah always told the travelers the same thing: stay close to the light. Because Freedom Hollow was not a forgiving place, the trees there grew thick and twisted. The ground dipped into sudden hollows and swampy patches. Paths that looked clear in the moonlight could disappear completely just a few yards later. And once someone lost the trail in those woods, they might wander for days. One bitter October night in 1856, Sarah guided a small group of runaways toward Freedom Hollow. The group was small but desperate: a man named Elijah, a woman named Ruth, Ruth's two children, both under the age of 10, and another man named Samuel who had joined them earlier during their escape. They had already been traveling for 2 days. Behind them, somewhere far down the road, slave catchers were searching the countryside. Horses, dogs, lanterns swinging in the dark. Sarah knew the forest ahead was dangerous, but it was also their best chance. Once inside the woods, the hunters would struggle to follow them, so Sarah raised the lantern and stepped beneath the first row of trees. The group followed closely behind. The deeper they walked into the Freedom Hollow, the darker the forest became. The branches above tangled together so tightly that even the moonlight struggled to reach the ground. Soon the only light they could see was Sarah's lantern, and the deeper they walked, the quieter the woods became. No owls, no insects, no wind. Just the sound crunch of leaves beneath their feet. Then suddenly, the distant sound of dogs echoed through the night, closer than before. Sarah stopped walking immediately. She lowered the lantern and listened. The barking grew louder. The slave catchers were following them into the woods. Sarah turned the group and pointed toward a fallen tree covered in moss. Hide. There. They crawled beneath the tangled branches while Sarah stood silently listening. The barking of the dogs echoed again. Closer. Sarah lifted the lantern and whispered something strange. If I don't come back, follow the lantern. No one understood what she meant, but before they could ask, Sarah turned and walked deeper into the forest. The lantern light slowly disappeared between the trees, and then it was gone. The group waited. Minutes passed, then an hour. The barking of the dogs moved through the woods, then slowly faded away. The forest became quiet again, too quiet. The children clung to their mother, trembling in the darkness. Then Elijah noticed something strange. A faint golden glow appeared between the trees. The lantern. It was moving toward them, but Sarah was nowhere to be seen. The lantern drifted slowly through the forest, swinging gently as if someone invisible were carrying it. The group stared in silence as the light floated closer. Finally, it stopped just a few feet away. The flame burned steadily inside the glass. Then slowly, the lantern turned north and began moving again. Samuel whispered, "Maybe she's ahead of it." So the group followed the lantern step by step through the forest. For hours they walked behind the floating light. Sometimes the lantern drifted far ahead. Sometimes it slowed and waited. But they never saw Sarah again, and no voice ever called to them from the darkness. Just a lantern leading them deeper into Freedom Hollow, until finally, just before dawn, the trees began to thin, and the lantern stopped beside a farmhouse at the edge of the woods. A farmer opened the door and rushed them inside. When the group turned back to thank the lantern, it was gone, and Sarah Whitlow was never seen again. Years passed. Slavery ended. The secret routes of the Underground Railroad faded into history. Freedom Hollow became just another forgotten stretch of the forest. But the stories about the lantern never stopped. Hunters began reporting strange lights moving through the trees at night. Travelers lost in the woods claimed the lantern appeared guided them safely back to the roads. But others told darker stories, stories of people following the lantern for hours, only to realize they were walking deeper and deeper into the forest. Stories of hearing whispering voices while the lantern floated ahead. Soft voices singing old spiritual songs once used by escaping slaves. Songs that echoed through the trees even when no one else was there. In the summer of 1934, four teenagers from a nearby town decided to find a lantern themselves. They had grown up hearing the stories about Freedom Hollow. So one warm July night, they grabbed flashlights and walked into the woods just before midnight. At first, the forest seemed normal. Crickets chirped, the wind rustled the leaves, the boys laughed and joked about the old ghost stories. Then one of them suddenly stopped walking. Wait, do you see that? Far between the trees, a dim yellow glow flickered. The lantern is exactly like stories described. The group followed it deeper into the forest, but something strange began happening. The farther they walked, the colder the air became. The sounds of insects slowly disappeared. The woods grew silent. Then one of the boys turned around. The trail behind them had vanished. The trees looked different, twisted, thicker, as if the forest itself had shifted around them. Then they heard something else, a faint voice, somewhere in the darkness, singing, an old spiritual song once used by escaping slaves traveling along the Underground Railroad. The lantern suddenly stopped moving, and slowly, it began drifting toward them. For just a moment, standing behind the light, a tall woman in an old dress, her face pale, tears running down her cheeks. Then the lantern flame suddenly flared brighter. The boys ran, screamed through the woods. They didn't stop until sunrise. Today, historians studying the Underground Railroad have tried to find records of conductor Sarah Whitlow. They searched church records, farm journals, learned from travelers guided by the famous Harriet Tubman, but they never found a single document proving Sarah Whitlow existed. No birth record, no death record, nothing. Yet, dozens of escape stories from that region mention the same thing, a lantern in the woods guiding people north, always described the same way, an iron frame, cloudy glass, and a flame that never flickered in the wind. So, some historians begin asking a strange question. What if the lantern was never carried by a conductor? What if it was something else lived in those woods? Something that learned to guide lost travelers, something that watched the Underground Railroad for years, learning the paths, learning the songs, learning the fare, and maybe, sometimes guiding people to safety, but sometimes leading them somewhere else entirely. Even today, locals who live near the woods still give visitors the same warning. If you ever find yourself lost in Freedom Hollow at night and you see a lantern glowing between the trees, follow it. It might lead you home, but never call out to it. Never try to grab it, and whatever you do, if the lantern suddenly stops and slowly turns toward you, run. Because the lantern might still be searching for someone new to guide through the forest. Someone new to replace the conductor who never came back. And once Freedom Hollow chooses its guide, the lantern never goes out. Please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And until next time.